Summer 2006. Canadian law enforcement round up 18 young Muslims, many of them children.
The biggest anti-terrorism case in Canada.
This group took steps to acquire components necessary to create explosive devices using ammonium nitrate, which is a commonly used fertilizer. 3 tons of ammonium nitrate was ordered by these individuals and delivered to them. It was their intent to use it for a terrorist attack.
No comment. No comment.
The young men are branded as homegrown terrorists by Canada's spy agency CSIS and the RCMP.
In an emerging plot that eventually included attacks on prominent Canadians, Parliament, the Toronto Stock Exchange, and the CBC.
Charges for half of the adult suspects include intending to cause an explosion. All of them are charged with belonging to a terrorist group.
There appears to be evidence that such a terrorist act was imminent.
The arrests are shown as a great victory for CSIS and the RCMP.
In the Commons, both sides of the House were quick to congratulate the work of security and intelligence services.
Our forces, our security people are doing a very good job. Good intelligence work. You see that here.
They must be congratulated in having this success.
There's praise for Canada's actions in this case from the Bush administration and the White House.
We congratulate Canadian authorities on intercepting such a plot.
We congratulate Canada for doing that, and that's what we want to have done.
They're congratulating Canada, and Britain's congratulating Canada. We did the right thing. We did a great thing.
All the back-patting from politicians and foreign governments is justified.
Are you here for a family member?
By the sensational trial by media that follows.
Focus on mosques and the suggestion that the radicalization occurs there or around there.
Radicalized.
They may have been radicalized.
On terrorism.
Terrorists in the Toronto area.
Terrorists in Toronto.
Violence and even terrorism, or at least that's the allegation.
There's something we have to remind us is that these people that has been arrested are innocent until proven guilty.
Right, and we can't repeat that enough, actually.
Yes,
the impression is left quite clearly on the public.
And you saw a successful operation.
These men must be guilty.
My client's alleged to have been part of a plot to blow up Parliament buildings in Canada, storm the CBC, take over the CBC, as well as, among other things, behead the Prime Minister.
Somebody's talking about his mother-in-law. The agony she's given him, I want to cut her head off. He's talking with his friends. Doesn't this happen? What is how can you take this against a person? They don't have even one tape between two of the suspects on their own talking about this subject. The only tape they have about this subject is when one of the informants is with them. What does this tell you?
As the suspects wait for what they hope is a fair trial, the presumption of guilt is all the Canadian public knows. And with a media blackout, even that perception is fading from the public consciousness as the months in prison stretch into years. But is there more to the story than we've been told?
And the timing of these arrests coincides with the government's plan to review its anti-terrorist laws.
The timing is interesting, though, because your committee is set to review Canada's security legislation. Many of the critics have said it goes too far, but now it'll be examined through the prism of these events over the weekend.
Let's first take a look at who the suspects are and how they know each other, if they even know each other at all. The main ties between the suspects are that most attended the same mosque. Beyond that, several of the suspects had gone to the same school, and there had been minimal contact between some of the young men on the internet. Essentially, church, school, and the internet. Just an average social network between average everyday Canadians. Tariq Abdel-Halim runs CaptiveInCanada.com. He's also the father of suspect Sharif Abdel-Halim, who attended the Al Rahman Islamic Center.
They don't know each other. They don't know. My son didn't know anybody. He knew a couple of them. I don't want to get into that, but he knew a couple of them just as a friend. None of them knows, everyone knows one and two of each other. Like they go pray, how are you doing, whatever, talk about something and go. When someone of this group go and pray in some other place and talk with somebody like anybody talks, that is a link. They actually try to establish the link through a third party. This knows this, and this knows this guy, so this guy knows this guy. And you know that I can tell you now, sitting here, I know Hillary Clinton. Because they said that within 6 links, you can get to anybody in the world. That's why the prosecution will have a very hard time to establish the group. And they are getting away of it now, because there is no group. There are no groups. There are no groups.
I never expected it, and he doesn't deserve it.
Quotes from family, friends, and acquaintances confirm these are normal people. But the official story would have us believe that 18 young Canadians, some with very promising careers and from respected families, out of the blue wanted to blow up buildings and kill innocent civilians. What could transform such ordinary people?
Again, Peter, that this phenomenon is really internet spread more than anything else now.
There are thousands of internet sites that spread an Al-Qaeda ideology.
According to an investigative report by CBC's The Fifth Estate, the website being referred to is clearguidance.com. Since the website was shut down, finding Amara and Ahmad's web postings has been difficult. But whatever has been reported in the media is innocent, even fluffy chat room banter. While the media has reported some truly disturbing postings from the website, anything they've quoted from these suspects is completely harmless. Is this the best that the media could dig up? Any of these quotes fall well within free expression. The worst thing we could find was some poetry. And that's hardly a crime, right? An article in the Globe and Mail tries to paint one suspect as a suicide bomber. They quote comments in his high school yearbook. "Before us there were many, after us there will be none. We are the ones." But wait, that sounds familiar. Or perhaps it's a direct quote from Atlanta-based rapper King Conscious. It's a likely explanation, especially since 2 suspects are from the Atlanta area. Now, before anybody arrests Jay-Z or King Conscious for radicalizing today's Muslim youth, there might be a more plausible explanation as to what got the attention of CSIS in the first place.
There was even a Liberal MP that was part of the investigation, because his parents complained that something was happening at the Islamic Center. They kicked him out. They told him, "Get out of here." It was Wajid Khan. He complained to everybody in the house. It was no secret. It was in the house.
In 2005, prominent Muslim politician Wajid Khan visited the Al Rahman Islamic Center in Toronto. It's been widely reported that during his visit, Khan heard a speech from the oldest suspect, Qayyum Abdul-Jamal.
There are reports that at least one of the individuals involved in this, in fact, spoke out against Canada's role in Afghanistan, but you don't think there's a connection?
No, I don't. And
after Qayyum publicly criticized Canada's military role in Afghanistan, Member of Parliament Wajid Khan had this to say about him.
"We have to watch out for people who are trying to teach disaffected youths that it's the Muslims against the rest, a war of civilizations. Anyone talking through his hat should be kicked out and reported."
Then there's this article from Maclean's. It reads, asked by Maclean's if he reported Qayyum's incendiary views to the RCMP or CSIS, Khan said cautiously,
"I don't think I want to answer that question for obvious reasons. All I can say is that I did my duty. I can't be quoted on specifics."
The next summer, Qayyum was arrested at gunpoint, along with 17 other Muslims, many of whom attended the same mosque.
I don't think these things happen by coincidence. It only happens in the lives of simple people like us. Coincidence happens. In these people's lives, it doesn't happen in coincidence. So Wahid Khan, as an agent of Stephen Harper, he went there. He heard what his people told him that you will hear, and as a representative of the government, his word is strong. He gave this statement about Abdul Qayyum, and he focused the light there. Here is the light. The light of what? The guy is saying something that can be said in any free country. That's what Stephen Harper should be proud of. Is one of his people in his own country is saying it loud and clear. I cannot speak my mind. Look, Qayyum was under the false understanding of democracy. He was criticizing sending people to Afghanistan. What is bad about that? He was under the impression that we are a free country.
The same summer these men were arrested, Liberal MP Wajid Khan oddly became the conservative advisor on the Middle East and Afghanistan. 5 months later, he left the Liberals altogether and joined the ruling Conservative Party. Did Wajid Khan sell out his fellow Muslims as initiation to prove he was the right man for the Middle East position? We can only speculate. The surveillance leading up to the arrests was admittedly uneventful. That changed with the injection of at least 2 informants.
It's very interesting to see a surveillance put on people for 2 years, a full 2 years. And after the 2 years, a couple of informants appear, then all of a sudden charges of explosions and bombing.
One of the spies is Mubin Shaikh. The ex-military reservist voluntarily outed himself as an informant in the case for an interview with Lyndon McIntyre of CBC's The Fifth Estate.
To err on the side of caution, I would have to say that these are fruitcakes nonetheless, but with the capacity to do some real damage.
Before working for CSIS, Mubin admits to living a life of women, clubbing, and drugs.
There were the potheads on the corner there, and it was just an easy life. Like, I've done it all. Acid, mushrooms, like, I got 5 tattoos, 12 self-inflicted cigarette burns. When I was sober doing all this.
Mubin is a confused person. His problem is he wants money, he's a drug addict, he has some good intentions inside him, you know, he doesn't want to really hurt many people, he wants to hurt people enough to get the money.
Keep in mind that the big threat, the supposedly inevitable danger to Canada, was a fertilizer bomb. The police say that these men had the intent to blow up civilians. Here's Mubin Shaikh on the Fifth Estate.
When did you know that this fertilizer or the ammonium nitrate was in the equation?
Just before it was made public.
Oh, so you didn't really...
I didn't know about it. I didn't know what these guys were up to, nothing of the sort.
Wow, we should see that again.
I didn't know what these guys were up to, nothing of the sort. It just shocked me, it blew me away, pardon the pun.
This guy infiltrated a group of friends who supposedly had the intent and the means to cause an explosion. But even the inside man of this alleged terrorist group didn't catch a hint that there was any bomb in the first place. So why is he on television supporting the official story being given by CSIS and the RCMP? And what was Mubin Shaikh's true role in this operation?
They eventually asked him to direct a 10-day winter training program in guerrilla tactics in rural Ontario.
Let us point out that Mubin was a member of the Royal Canadian Army Cadets until he was 19 years old.
A license to acquire and carry weapons is hard to get in Canada, but Mubin Shaikh earned one while an Army cadet and reservist rifle instructor.
Mubin is licensed to purchase weapons, and he's trained to use them.
The guy who called for this was Mubin. The guy who carried the only gun that was in that place, the real one, was Mubin in his pocket. Nobody saw it. It's his gun. Nobody had any gun. If you have a group of people driving a car that belongs to the informant, going to a place where the informant chosen, having the only gun that is real is in the pocket of the informant and they don't know about it. They were told that they are going to play paintball and they had the paintball stuff and they wanted to go there to do the game. They drew all the intentions in the gas station. They knocked on door to get some drinks.
On the way to the so-called training camp, this group of young Muslim men stopped to ask for directions. Nothing strange there. What is odd is that they chose to stop at a detachment for the Ontario Provincial Police.
They went to the OPP, for God's sake. I mean, what else can they do to draw attention? This can never be an act of terrorism. They went and knocked on door of one of the houses. They asked for water to drink. How can terrorists go to knock on water because they want to give us some water, please, we want to drink? Terrorists they want to be hidden, right? They want to hide. No, they went to a house close by and they not say, well, we are just making some training here and we want some water, please. What kind of terrorist is this?
Is this Mubin Sheikh's true role? Setting up young men to look like terrorists and then drawing attention to the fact? It's the classic mode of operation for an agent provocateur. For whatever purpose Mubin was hired, he was paid generously, with your tax dollars.
He was given 70,000 as first payment, and he was given 300,000. Is the whole thing? I think it's $370,000.
Almost $370,000 for less than 1 year's work. In 2006, Mubin earned as much money as some doctors, lawyers, and movie stars. He's a self-admitted drug abuser, which raises questions about how your tax dollars will end up being spent.
Acid, mushrooms.
In 2007, Mubin admitted to spending a significant amount of his informant money on cocaine. Lots of cocaine.
He is a drug addict, and this was published in the time. He actually confessed it in the time. I'm not saying anything that's secret. He is a drug addict, and he's been for a long time, and he has a temper. He was charged with assault on one of his family members. He actually was trying to make money, out of whatever way he can, because like I said, he's not highly educated. He could not actually have a regular job. That's what I keep telling people.
Some of Mubin's money will probably also go to his lawyers after he was charged in April with assaulting two 12-year-old girls. That's right, the poster boy for CSIS counter-terrorism, as of the creation of this documentary, is charged with assaulting two female children. But because there's a presumption of innocence in any free country, we won't refer to him by sensational labels. The other informant in this case is currently in witness protection and by law cannot be identified. But according to the Globe and Mail, he's a 28-year-old Egyptian with a degree in agricultural engineering. According to this security specialist with the Mackenzie Institute, trying to buy 3 tons of fertilizer will get you thrown in jail pretty quick. But according to the CBC, a degree in agricultural engineering gave our police informant the credentials and capability to purchase 3 tons of ammonium nitrate without suspicion. An agricultural engineer can earn about $60,000 a year in Canada. This one wanted $14 million for half a year's work with CSIS. Just like Mubin, this informant was going to make a pretty penny by building a case for terrorism.
He is not smart whatsoever. He's not a smart boy. That spy, he is not He is not smart. He is criminally smart. We established ourselves in this country. This guy came, he became a failure. He couldn't find a good job to work.
The Globe and Mail has reported on the lavish lifestyle that our mystery informant leads. In spite of a poor track record in the business world, Mr. X tends to live high on the hog. He once reportedly caught a flight to Santiago on a whim so that he could show a friend how good Chilean food is.
His financial situation was so bad, in terms of credit cards, in terms of not having a job, in many things. This is an easy way to get money for people who really have no conscience or morals. He had many debts, and actually CSIS talked to him after they paid him part of his money for this scam to go and pay his debts, because they don't want people to come out and taint his credibility. So he paid it like under CSIS direction. He didn't want to pay anything, but he paid it. He went to people, here is your money, because he doesn't want people to testify against him that he's a scumbag, you know. He's a fraud, he's a crook. So that's what he did. He wanted to make money. He found CSIS saying, they said, do you know these people? He said, yeah, I know one of them. I'm not going to get into who or what, but he saw the opportunity that he can. So he negotiated $12 million down to $4 million. And CSIS, as stupid as they are, they agreed.
This group took steps to acquire components necessary to create explosive devices using ammonium nitrate. It was their intent to use it for a terrorist attack.
If the suspects really had the capacity and intent to cause an explosion, and were really interested in training for guerrilla warfare, then why did it take the implementation of 2 spies for it to happen?
The 17 people that were arrested at that time, none of them, except the 2 they were convicted in getting these guns from the States. The other people, there is none even any offense, any offense against them. There is nothing. They have clean past. On the contrary, the 2 informants, you know their story. It's very interesting. What were they doing during the 2 years then? Why didn't they move until these people, these informants, were injected into the place?
After seeing the characters of these 2 informants, it's clear why they would want to build a case of terrorism. To get paid. But why would CSIS and the RCMP want to build a possibly phony case? Why would our security service and national law enforcement want to misrepresent the facts of alleged homegrown terrorism? The reason.
And the timing of these arrests coincides with the government's plan to review its anti-terrorist laws.
As the committee gets set to begin this review, you have the most significant foiling of an alleged terrorist plot since 9/11.
Je pense les sommes d'argent qu'on voudra, on pourrait doubler d'ici à demain.
Throughout the 90s, CSIS had fallen on hard times. Hundreds of staff were laid off, and depending on the estimate, the CSIS budget was cut by anywhere between 21 and 37%. David Harris is a former chief of strategic planning for CSIS. In 1999, he outlined the organization's budget problems in a speech to the United States House of Representatives Committee. During his speech, he blamed cutbacks on a laissez-faire attitude towards fighting terror in Canada. He stressed that the country needed to convince its citizens that terrorism could happen to Canadians.
We're not immune ourselves, and we could be potential targets to terrorist acts.
We're not immune. All Canadians should be concerned about the kinds of revelations we've seen over the last several weeks.
This was a real wake-up call that here it is, we have an alleged incident broken up.
In 2001, CSIS had their prayers answered.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
After the attacks on New York City and Washington, D.C., CSIS received billions of dollars in extra funding. Their post-9/11 budget grew by 36%, a significant amount which brought them right back to a fiscal standard they had enjoyed before the budget cuts of the 90s. The RCMP also received hundreds of millions of dollars in extra funding.
I think we can be glad that another $9 billion over that 4 or 5 year period has been put into security preparations.
But with a budget review in 2006, if that money was going to keep rolling in, the threat of terror in Canada had to continue.
Now the RCMP had, what, $200 million additional dollars from Harper not too long ago in the budget? And they promised that they would be vigilant. They would take steps so that my brother doesn't get scared when he reads the Sunday news.
With the cash injection following 9/11, a campaign was started by Canada's security and police agencies.
We have a pretty impressive record of keeping these menaces and these terrorist threats under wraps.
It's odd, because it's the third time the RCMP has held such an operation. The first time was after the events in New York, 9/11. Operation Shock, I think. They arrested 20 Pakistanis and Muslims in Toronto. They arrested them. They were dangerous. And there was a lot of publicity. In court, not one of them was found guilty. The judge said they never should have been arrested. Free them. The RCMP was not happy, and that was the end of that. In 2003, September 3rd, another operation. They arrested another group of Pakistanis in Toronto, and they said, oh, we've got them now, the big bad ones. They went to trial, and the judge said, no, there's no case. There's one that had not paid a traffic ticket. He had to pay his traffic ticket. 2 were students whose visas were not in order. They had to go back to Pakistan, but it had nothing to do with terrorism.
Tragically, the majority of the Project Thread suspects were deported to Pakistan, where they now carry the label of terrorist. Some of the victims of that witch hunt report that they received frequent death threats. While there were some 400 students with the same visa irregularities that drew the attention of Project Thread, it was only the Mohammeds who were rounded up and deported. The incident was an embarrassment for CSIS and the RCMP, but the old saying goes, if first you don't succeed, try again. The very next year, surveillance on the homegrown suspects of 2006 began. After the summer arrests of 2006, it appeared that the CSIS and RCMP budgets were secure.
In Parliament Hill, I can tell you that the Procedures and House Affairs Committee had started discussions on security measures on Parliament Hill to increase security measures. I think this will only increase that level of discussion.
Many of the critics have said they believe it goes too far. But now it'll be examined through the prism of these events over the weekend.
Is there a politician in the land who will now declare that C-36 is overkill?
The threat of truck bombs and headless politicians did the trick. Just like David Harris and CSIS wanted, Canadians were scared of terrorism again.
My friend said it really does hit home. The biggest issue with it is it's the safety of the country. It's obviously not up to standard. What are we doing here different than we're doing in the States? We really got to crack down on all this type of stuff from going on. Our immigration laws right down to our own safety. If it's a Big Brother type of atmosphere that we need to keep us safe, then we got to do it. If it's a Big Brother type of atmosphere that we need to keep us safe, then we got to do it.
If somebody wanted to barrel up that traffic entrance to Parliament Hill in a van full of explosives, what's really in place to stop that from happening?
Could a truckload of explosive barrel through whatever security we have and make it to the steps of Parliament Hill? I believe that yes, they could.
We are a target, and we need to take this seriously.
Canada is a target, and the only question is not if, but when.
Politicians also seemed scared. After all, they were targeted to have their heads cut off. This is the morning after allegations about storming Parliament were made public. Apparently, MPs didn't want a drawn-out workday.
What we saw in the House today was the budget passed through the Commons on third reading unanimously this afternoon. The finance minister is crowing that even the Liberals and New Democrats have supported his budget, even though we know you oppose it. There's more to the story here. What happened this afternoon?
Speaker Milliken asked not once, not twice, but 3 times to try and get someone to stand up and speak to this bill, and no one did.
What happened this morning was a procedural wonder in that the budget passed through literally in about a minute and a half, and that happened.
It was Speaker Milliken on the chair, and it was clear. He asked every question for every bill, and nobody stand up and ask for mise au voix,
a vote, to call a vote,
to call a vote on this matter. No, it was there's no mix-up. It was clear, and it was Speaker Milliken.
So what happened? What do you think happened?
I don't know. Maybe our two other parties changed their mind.
Okay, let's finish.
I think that's a bit of a misinterpretation.
Let's finish on the time we have.
CSIS and the RCMP had justified their previous funding and secured future funding. Hundreds of millions of dollars in future funding. On top of that, Safety Minister Stockwell Day was now in a position to start expanding CSIS powers, as he's been trying to do for years.
That's why another of the areas that we have committed extra resources to is the whole area of the ability to scan the net, scan the internet, cyber capabilities, so that we can zero in on some of these programs that get cast out over the internet. Products that are normally used for good purposes may have to be monitored, and that's certainly what we're doing.
If it's a big brother type of atmosphere that we need to keep us safe, then we got to do it.
It's a political agenda of the Conservative Party in order to justify their being subservient to Bush administration, and to send troops to Afghanistan to serve Bush and to save face. The point is that they want to keep the fear. Not giving bail is a statement. It's milking the cow. Just keep milking them. There is a new way to milk. The Cold War with Russia has ended. What do? Let's hit the Muslim world. I think that they are playing a very dirty role. They show themselves as playing a role to protect people, but they actually play on the fear of people. The dirt is not there. It's mixed and thrown on us and say, see how dirty you are, I'm going to clean you up. You thrown the dirt on us in the first place to keep this fear, state of fear in their mind.
Tariq is right. There's a name for when governments inflict damage upon themselves and blame it on another group: false flag terror. It's a common political tactic that dates back to the time of the Roman Empire, when Emperor Nero burned Rome and blamed it on the Christians. Recently and historically, governments have used the tactic of false flag terrorism to further political agendas and unite public opinion. Though not as serious an offender as some, Canada is one of those countries. To understand any atmosphere of corruption at CSIS, one must look at the roots of the organization.
I think that you have to have the cooperation of the leadership and the broad spectrum of that community. You know, whether it's people in the First Nations, whether it's the the French community at one period of time, and the feelings they were the French community at one period of time, and the feelings they were.
During the 1970s, after the October crisis, the RCMP Security Service was put in charge of investigating separatist and leftist organizations, including the FLQ. Throughout their investigations, RCMP and RCMP intelligence were found to be frequently and systematically committing many illegal acts. Hundreds of break-ins, burglaries, arson. One RCMP officer, Robert Sampson, blew his own hand off planting a bomb while investigating separatist sympathizers. During his trial for that incident, Sampson said that he had, quote, done much worse for the RCMP. According to award-winning journalist John Sawatsky, the RCMP security service would break into the offices of political parties. They once even stole the member list of the separatist Parti Québécois. It was a Canadian version of Watergate. Other RCMP dirty trick tactics included a plan to pose as lumberjacks in British Columbia. While undercover, they were to beat members of the partisan party to the point of unconsciousness and steal their documents. One of the targets was a pregnant woman. Sawatsky says that illegal activity was accepted with enthusiasm, since it was exciting, was good for one's career, and contributed to the fight against communism. The people who encouraged and helped to cover these events up were some of the highest-ranking members of the RCMP. Sawatsky won an award for his investigation into the RCMP, and it sparked the politely titled MacDonald Inquiry into Certain Acts of the RCMP. It was that inquiry which led to the CSIS Act, and ironically, in 1984, Canada's domestic spy agency became operational. Things were bad from the start. The Security Intelligence Review Committee, or SIRC, was created to oversee the new spy agency. According to the SIRC's first executive director, Maurice Archdeacon, CSIS was perpetuating the very culture that the new agency was supposed to bring to a stop. And within 1 year of CSIS going operational, the Air India incident happened.
Crews raced to the scene, but there was no one to rescue, just bodies to recover. 84 of the victims were children. 278 people who died on the flight were Canadian. Relatives of the victims are angry because authorities have been able to tell them what happened to Air India Flight 182. A bomb went off, but no one has been able to tell them who did it.
So secrecy and scandal within the RCMP did not end with the creation of CSIS. Our own government admits it. RCMP corruption continued on into the newly created spy agency. But now, the public was unable to hold them to account. They were allowed to have secrets. They were allowed to break the law. And they still worked closely with these guys. Fast forward again to the so-called homegrown suspects of 2006. In Ontario, there are only 12 detachments for the RCMP. 12 detachments in 12 separate towns out of the entire province. The fertilizer these suspects were supposedly looking for was delivered to a warehouse in one of those 12 towns. This is the Toronto North RCMP detachment in Newmarket, Ontario. This is the warehouse where the fertilizer was delivered, not even half a kilometer from the Mounties headquarters in Newmarket.
The question is, why did they wait 18 months? Maybe they didn't have enough evidence. But once they delivered the substance, they had enough evidence.
You know that the RCMP building is right next to the warehouse.
Yeah. Well, you tell me, what does it mean? How can intelligent terrorists who are going to do this hilarious stuff that is even beyond Arnold in Terminator 2, and they don't even think about renting some place away from the police, in the back of the police station? Who would believe that?
Flashlights, barbecue tongs, duct tape. The only real piece of evidence in this case was delivered by the RCMP to one of their neighbors. We don't want to insult your intelligence by telling you how suspicious that is. This is Unit 6 at 1228 Gorham Street. The occupants of this unit don't know much about what took place here in the summer of 2006. But this man is a different story. He was present during the police raids at the warehouse and tells us what happened.
My name is Ken Kerr.
I'm the general manager of Managing Motorcycles. I guess it's about, 20 to 6. But I'm standing up, as I'm looking outside the front, out my front foyer, and I see all these coppers out there, all crouched down with guns out. It must have 25 coppers on the roof, with all their guns out and everything, oh yeah. And all of a sudden, I see the door next door goes flying through the air, and all kinds of glass and stuff flying through the air, and they're throwing percussion grenades at the door and everything else, and I actually got a clip out of one of the grenades too. I got one of the clips I've retrieved outside, So I go to the back, and the two young fellows I met earlier in the day, they got the pin to the ground at the back here. One kid, they're standing on his face, and there's blood running out of him pretty bad. So, because I said something to the guy, I said, "Holy fuck, that's kind of cruel, isn't it? Fucking mind your own business. I think you better get inside, I said, okay, And I think, holy shit,
A month after Ken's experience, he tells us that he spoke with the owner of Unit 6 and got an explanation as to exactly what happened.
It was a setup. The way I got the story off of the guy owning the unit, Robert, the cops had approached him, and they said, we want these guys to move into your unit, and boom, look how close they are. They're only like 500 feet away, really. He just checked in what's around here handy. He looked at what units are around there for a rent, and then Christ, this one's right around the corner. They made a phone call to him and said, hey, can we talk to you? They come over and talk to him and say, here, we got something we're going to do. Would you mind if we rented your unit? So, yeah, but a real estate guy that Robert told me, he said, oh no, they approached him and released it off him. I guess to put this sting or whatever you call it together. His name was Lasseline, I think it is. Bob Lasseline or Robert Lasseline, whatever you call it.
Phone calls to Robert's office were not returned. We contacted our local land registry and found that the warehouse is in fact listed under the name Cynthia Lasseline, Robert's wife. She was nice enough to speak with us, but wouldn't go as far as to tell us who approached them to rent the unit.
We're owners, so questions that you want to ask, I have to be sure of my answer.
Okay. I had spoken with some of the neighbors. They told me that he was actually approached in the first place by the RCMP.
Now, see, that's where you have to get the details.
Okay.
Because I don't have those details.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to share this with my husband.
And it would be greatly appreciated. It's that simple.
If I come up with you're not going to get a response, then you'll hear from me as well, and I'll just say to you, no, I'm sorry. Like, I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah. Actually, I have some pretty good intentions with this.
In that may all be the case, and I'm not completely without an opinion on it, but the thing of it is here, we are a property owner, right? I won't speak on this topic without speaking to my husband, and so that we
totally
figure out what the angle is here.
After speaking with her husband, Cynthia called us back.
Good evening, David. It's Cindy Lasseline returning a call that we had earlier this week. I've spoken to my husband, and I really don't have any information to share. I'm not interested in meeting with you, and I thank you for your phone call. Take care. Bye.
Neither CSIS nor the RCMP will give us their official account of events. The CBC reports that the suspects were looking for space to hold the fertilizer between late May and early June. But if Ken spoke with Mr. Lasseline in July...
His exact words were, I've already rented the place out for 3 months for the police. They got some kind of thing happening.
They bought the fertilizer. They drove the truck. They rented the place. They suggested the type of this thing. What are you talking about? They are not doing anything. For 2 years, nothing happened until these two people appeared. If these two people didn't appear, it wasn't going to be 2 years. After 20 years, nothing would have happened.
In an interview, this RCMP agent is very tight-lipped. But from what little he does reveal, even he makes it seem that the RCMP did orchestrate this event.
There are targets, all in the south of Ontario. We just want to reassure people that everything was under control at all times. There was no direct threat.
And remember Mubin Shaikh? The guy who supposedly infiltrated a dangerous group?
To err on the side of caution, I would have to say that these are fruitcakes nonetheless, but with the capacity to do some real damage.
Well, Mubin changed his tune, but only after he received hundreds of thousands of your tax dollars. In an interview in the summer of 2007, Mubin said outright that many of the suspects charged are innocent. Innocent! This is coming from the very mole that supposedly infiltrated the group. One of the innocent ones, he says, is Stephen Chand. Apparently, Mubin hopes the innocent ones are released from solitary confinement sooner rather than later. How nice of him.
The first thing is that I want to say that who is going to pay for 14 months of solitary confinement that was found afterwards that it wasn't necessary? Who is going to pay for that? 14 months these kids stayed in a steel room that is 4 by 6 with no window. Only a small little window open when they get food. 23.5 hours they sit there on their own on the floor. 14 months. This is what's happening now in the Don Valley with Zakaria and Dairy and Ahmed Fahim. For 3 and 4 weeks no shower. They're not allowed. Stephen Chand was pulled out of his shower, was dragged naked from his hair on the floor in front of the people and was hit on the face by the guards there. What kind of human rights we're talking about here? What kind of innocent until proven guilty?
The evidence is flimsy, questionable, and possibly illegal. That's why, in a rare move, Crown prosecutors stayed the charges against the accused in 2007, right in the middle of the preliminary hearings. The suspects were then recharged in what has been called a travesty of the courts.
After the preliminary started, it was really a joke. The evidence that was presented, I'm not going to say what it is, but in one word, it was a joke. And it was appeared to everybody, including the judge, that there is nothing behind this. It's just uncooked story. It's a made-to-measure case. After 4 days of Mubin's testimony, the whole case started to collapse. And the prosecutor saw it happening. It's going to collapse. So they stopped it. They said, no, we have the right to stop it. But the problem is, if the preliminary went through, most of these people would go out on bail. The problem is that the bail, they are denying them bail. I have no idea why are denying them bail. This trial is said it was said that it's going to take another 5-6 years.
Without the prelims?
Without the prelim. From now.
In other words, this was an act of political theater.
But how will the judge see this? Will this be the third time that this is all for naught?
Terrorism is defined as violence or the threat of violence for a political purpose.
This group took steps to acquire components necessary to create explosive devices using ammonium nitrate. It was their intent to use it for a terrorist attack.
The timing is interesting, though, because your committee is set to review Canada's security legislation. Many of the critics have said it goes too far, but now it'll be examined through the prism of these events over the weekend.
Terrorist.